What happens when a husband, knocked down in front of everyone, refuses to fight back with fists? I thought Evan's silence proved weakness, but days later, I was staring at stamped documents that cut deeper than any blow. How did one shove at a family party turn into losing custody, money, and even respect? I told myself it was just fun, the kind of fun a serious man like Evan never understood. Jason made me feel alive at the gym, always calling me strong, always saying I deserved better energy at home. So when he knocked Evan down at the family party, everyone laughed, even my sister Tara, who filmed the whole thing. Evan lay there in the grass, silent, while Jason raised his arms like a champion. I told people Evan was clumsy, that he fell because he was stiff, not because Jason shoved him. My father-in-law glared, my mother-in-law helped him up, but I laughed and said men roughhouse all the time. Later, online, Tara's clip went viral, people calling Evan weak, some even saying poor man married above his level. I read those comments out loud and smiled, telling Evan it was proof he needed to lighten up. He said nothing. He only picked up Nora's drawing of him on the ground and placed it carefully into a folder. I told myself his silence meant I had won, that humiliation was just another form of teaching. I could not see then what he was really building. The gym had become my second home, and Jason was the reason. He always lingered at the front desk where I worked, leaning on the counter like it was his stage, telling me I had more spark than anyone else in the building. I laughed every time, letting his praise sink into my skin. He said Evan probably made charts to fold socks, that he looked like the type who planned how to breathe. I said he was not wrong. Each laugh made me feel lighter, as if I was finally seen. When Jason offered me a smoothie after hours, I told myself it was harmless, just a friendly trainer helping a receptionist feel special. But I knew Evan would not see it that way. When Evan noticed I was getting home late, he asked if I'd been working overtime. I said yes, of course, what else would I be doing? He asked why Jason's car showed up on the neighborhood camera. I told him he was paranoid, that co-workers looked out for each other. He said it looked like secrecy. I told him he was trying to control me. He said nothing more, only wrote something in his notebook. That notebook unnerved me. He carried it everywhere now, small, black, and ordinary, but filled with lines of neat handwriting. I asked if he was journaling. He said he was keeping track of things. I laughed and told him he sounded ridiculous. He smiled faintly, but did not argue. That silence of his cut deeper than any fight. At dinner one night, Nora refused to eat her peas. She kept asking why Daddy had been pushed at the party. I said he fell because he was clumsy. She said she saw Jason shove him. I snapped that she imagined things. Evan told her gently she was not wrong. I yelled at him for filling her head with drama. He said quietly that honesty mattered. I accused him of making her turn against me. He stayed calm, picked up his plate, and ate at the sink. The way he carried himself, cold and steady, made me feel cornered. Later that week, my mother Lydia told me to ignore Evan's sulking. She said men hated when women were admired. My sister Tara cheered me on, saying the shove video was still getting views online. People laughed in the comments, calling Evan stone-face. I laughed too, even though part of me worried. When I showed Evan the video on my phone, he didn't flinch. He just asked why humiliating him made me happy. I said it wasn't humiliation, it was humor. He said humor wasn't supposed to hurt. I said he was fragile. He didn't answer, only printed the clip, wrote documented on the margin, and placed it in his folder. The next day at the gym, Jason teased me again. He asked if Evan still sulked. I said yes, always. Jason shook his head and said a man like that dragged women down. I laughed, though unease stirred in me. Still, I clung to Jason's words, needing them. When I got home, Evan was reading to Nora. She clung to him like he was the only safe place. I asked why she always needed him to tuck her in. She said Daddy didn't laugh at her. My chest tightened, but I told myself it was just a phase. At dinner with Evan's parents, Cliff looked at me sharply when Jason's name came up. He asked why I was spending so much time with another man. I said Jason was a mentor, helping me get healthier. Cliff said mentors didn't shove husbands at family parties. Marion said nothing at first, only watching Evan quietly take notes in his book. Then she looked at me and asked if I thought respect could grow out of ridicule. I snapped that she was poisoning him. She said calmly that dignity wasn't optional. I rolled my eyes. Evan said nothing, only helped Nora cut her food. That night, Evan stacked unopened bills on the counter. He said ignoring them hurt us both. I said he could handle them if he loved paperwork so much. He said it wasn't about paperwork, it was about responsibility. I told him not to act like my father. He said calmly, noted, and wrote in his notebook. I wanted to scream, to break the calm mask off his face. But he gave me nothing, only silence. Tara called later, laughing about a new round of comments under the video. Some people praised me for being lively. Others said I was cruel. She deleted those and told me not to worry. She sent me screenshots of the good ones, people saying I was too bright for my husband. I smiled and told myself they were right. That weekend, Jason brushed his hand against mine at the gym office. He said we should plan a team outing to show I had real energy. I told him maybe. He smirked. I felt chosen again. Back home, Evan placed another paper on the table, a credit card statement with charges at the smoothie bar. He asked if I was buying drinks with Jason. I said he was policing me. He said he wanted honesty. I said honesty was boring. He looked at me, then wrote another line in his notebook. Later, Nora showed me a drawing. Me standing with Jason at the gym, Daddy small in the corner with a frown. She said she saw it that way. I told her to draw something happier. She said she drew what she saw. My stomach twisted, but I smiled and told her she was silly. That night, Evan's notebook lay open on the counter when I walked by. I saw pages filled with dates, quotes, receipts taped inside. I shut it quickly before he came back. He looked at me and asked if I touched it. I said no. He said nothing, only placed it back in his bag. That silence again, heavy and sharp. I poured myself wine and scrolled Jason's texts. He sent me a heart and said Evan would never measure up. I clung to that message, telling myself Evan's silence meant nothing. But deep down, the word written on the printout, documented, stayed in my mind, heavier than I wanted to admit. The restaurant patio glowed with string lights, everyone laughing, glasses clinking, and I felt like it was my stage. Jason had arranged the group dinner, calling it a team-building night, but really, it was just another chance for me to shine. He sat close, making jokes about the way Evan never loosened up. He asked loudly if Evan counted his chewing. Everyone laughed, and I joined in, adding that he probably had a stopwatch for brushing his teeth. Jason slapped the table, roaring, and people looked at me like I was the life of the evening. Evan sat at the edge of the table, calm, sipping water. His silence annoyed me more than any insult could. I wanted him to fight back, but he just kept his eyes on Nora, who sat between us coloring on the paper menu. When the food came, Tara pulled out her phone and filmed a short clip of Jason poking fun at Evan. She whispered that she would post it with the title, Stoneface Husband. I grinned, thinking it was clever. Evan noticed her recording and asked why it was necessary. I said he should be proud, that he was part of my highlight reel. He shook his head and said not everything had to be a joke. I rolled my eyes and told everyone he always killed the vibe. They laughed, and Jason raised his glass to me, calling me the only spark at the table. Later, when dessert came, Nora asked if Daddy was sad. She said he looked like a ghost in the corner. I told her she was being dramatic. Evan touched her hand gently and said she was perceptive. I snapped at him for putting ideas in her head. He said nothing, only paid the bill while the others laughed. That silence of his was unbearable. When we got home, Tara had already uploaded the clip. Within an hour, comments rolled in. People called Evan lifeless, stone statue, poor guy doesn't deserve her. Some praised me for being radiant, saying I deserved a fun man like Jason. I laughed out loud reading them and showed Evan. He didn't flinch. He asked why humiliating him made me feel alive. I said it wasn't humiliation, it was humor. He said humor wasn't supposed to sting. I told him he was fragile. He said nothing, only printed the clip, wrote documented across the bottom, and placed it in his folder. My smile faltered, but I told myself it meant nothing. The next day, Jason teased me at the gym again. He said Evan probably wrote down the time of every laugh I had with him. I laughed nervously. Jason leaned closer and said some men were built to watch, others to live. I felt my face flush. A coworker overheard and frowned, but I ignored her. That night, Evan set a small stack of bills on the counter. He asked if I had opened them. I said I was too busy working. He said ignoring them could hurt us both. I told him he was nagging like an old man. He said calmly, "Noted," and slipped the bills under his notebook. His calm was like a wall I couldn't break. At dinner with my parents, Lydia said Evan needed to laugh more. She said Jason seemed fun. I smiled, enjoying her approval. Cliff shook his head and said Jason's shove at the party wasn't funny, that a husband's dignity wasn't a toy. I told him he was exaggerating. Tara laughed and said Evan looked ridiculous that night. Evan stayed silent, cutting Nora's food. Marion glanced at him and said sometimes silence was stronger than words. I felt cornered, so I laughed louder and told them Evan was sulking again. Later, Nora showed me a new drawing. This one had me and Jason sitting together, with Daddy drawn small at the end of the table. She said she drew what she saw. I told her to draw something happier. She said she couldn't. My chest tightened, but I told myself she was just a child. That night, when I went to bed, Evan's notebook lay on the nightstand. Curiosity burned me, but I didn't open it. He came in, picked it up, and placed it calmly into his bag. I asked what he was even writing. He said clarity. I told him clarity was boring. He said sometimes boring was safe. Then he turned off the light. The next morning, Tara sent me screenshots of new comments. Some praised me again, but a few asked if mocking a husband in front of his child was cruel. I deleted those, told myself people were jealous. Jason texted me a wink emoji and said I looked powerful at dinner. I clung to that. But when I went to the kitchen, I found the printed clip still on the table, documented, written in Evan's careful handwriting. The word sat there like a threat, heavier than Jason's praise. I crumpled it and threw it in the trash, but I knew he had already filed a copy in his folder, and that thought kept me awake longer than any joke could. The backyard party was supposed to be easy, just family and neighbors with food on the grill and music low in the background. Jason came because Tara invited him, saying it would liven things up. I wore a bright dress, wanting everyone to see how well I carried myself. Evan was there too, quiet as usual, helping Nora set up her lemonade stand at the edge of the yard. Jason wasted no time making jokes. He said Evan looked like a security guard standing by the cooler. People laughed, and I laughed with them. Evan didn't answer. That annoyed me. His calm was unbearable. As the night stretched on, Jason got louder. He nudged me, saying I needed someone who kept me smiling. I smiled and didn't stop him. At one point, Evan tried to gather Nora, saying it was getting late. Jason blocked his way, chuckling, asking why he always wanted to leave early. Evan said he wanted to take his daughter home. Jason shoved him lightly at first, calling him stiff. People laughed again. Evan stood steady. Then Jason shoved harder, and Evan stumbled onto the grass. Tara's phone was out in an instant, filming. Everyone roared. I clapped my hands over my mouth, pretending shock, but inside I felt a thrill that Jason would fight for me. Evan didn't shout. He didn't raise a fist. He just pushed himself up, brushed the dirt off his shirt, and looked at Nora, who was crying. Marion rushed to his side, helping him steady. Cliff shouted at Jason to stop acting like a boy. Lydia said it was only roughhousing. I jumped in, saying Evan tripped, that Jason didn't mean it. Jason smirked, raising his arms like a champion. People laughed again. I joined them because I couldn't stand the silence pressing down on me. Nora refused to let go of Evan. She cried into his sleeve, drawing later on a napkin with crayons she had in her bag. She sketched her father lying on the grass while everyone stood around laughing. She showed it to me and said, Daddy was sad. I told her she was imagining things. She said she wasn't. I felt a sting of irritation, but I forced a smile and told her to play. Tara replayed the clip on her phone, laughing. She said it was pure gold, that people online would love it. I told her to post it, that Evan needed to learn to laugh at himself. Evan didn't try to stop her. He just picked up Nora, nodded to Marion, and walked out of the yard without a word to me. That silence again, sharper than shouting. Later that night, Tara sent me the link. Already comments were piling up, some calling Jason a hero, others mocking Evan as weak. I read them out loud, smirking, and told myself it was proof I was vibrant and alive. But some comments cut differently, asking if humiliating a husband in front of his child was funny. I scrolled past those, deleting them where I could. Jason texted me a laughing emoji and wrote that Evan should never step into a ring. I laughed and told him he was right. When Evan came home later, he didn't speak to me. He tucked Nora into bed, kissed her forehead, and returned to the kitchen with his black notebook. He placed a printed copy of Tara's video on the table. Across the bottom, in his neat handwriting, he had written, "Documented." I scoffed and asked if he was turning into a detective. He didn't answer. He slipped the page into his folder and went to bed. I called Jason and told him Evan was pathetic, hiding behind paper. Jason laughed and told me to forget him, that I looked radiant tonight. I clung to that. But when I went to the bedroom, Evan was already asleep, his notebook resting on the nightstand. I stared at it, tempted to grab it, but something in me hesitated. I knew whatever he was writing would come back for me. The next morning, Nora wouldn't eat. She said she didn't want to see Jason again. I asked why. She said he made Daddy fall. I told her it was a joke. She said jokes weren't supposed to make Daddy cry. I snapped that she was too young to understand. Evan said nothing, only wrote another line in his book. At my parents' house that afternoon, Lydia defended Jason, saying men teased and roughhoused, that Evan was overreacting. Cliff shook his head and said Jason was reckless. Tara laughed, saying the video was still climbing in views. Marion told Evan quietly to keep collecting evidence. I rolled my eyes, telling everyone they were dramatic. That night, when I checked my phone, the video had spread further. Some people were praising Jason, but others were calling him a bully. A few even said I looked cruel for laughing. I deleted what I could and told myself the rest didn't matter. Jason sent me another message. "You deserve a man who fights for you." I smiled, though unease crept under my skin. Evan tucked Nora in again, humming softly. I hovered in the doorway, wanting to snap at him, but I stopped. His calm was too heavy. On the kitchen table, his folder sat closed, thick with pages. The word "documented" echoed in my head like a drumbeat. I poured a glass of wine and told myself he was bluffing. But I couldn't shake the thought that his silence was no weakness. It was something else entirely, something I was not ready to face. After the party, the air in the house felt heavier, like every corner carried silence I couldn't break. Evan stopped talking to me about Jason, stopped even asking where I was when I came home late. He just carried on with Nora's routine, packing her school bag, reading to her at night, making sure she brushed her teeth on time. I told myself his quiet meant surrender, but it unnerved me more than shouting ever could. I wanted him to fight. Instead, he wrote in his notebook. Always writing, never saying. Jason, meanwhile, treated the shove like his victory lap. At the gym, he bragged in the staff lounge that Evan looked like a rag doll, that no man could stand up to him. He said I must have been proud. I laughed and nodded, even though my stomach twisted. A coworker overheard and muttered that it wasn't funny. I told her to mind her business. Jason brushed it off, telling me not everyone understood strong energy. I let him flatter me, because it kept me from thinking about the way Evan's silence sat like a shadow at home. At dinner one night, Evan placed a neat pile of papers on the counter, printouts of the party video, Jason's public comments online, and Tara's post. Across each page, in the same calm handwriting, was the word "documented." I laughed too loudly and told him he was acting like a lawyer. He didn't answer. He tucked them into his folder and left the kitchen. I shouted after him that he made himself look like the victim on purpose. Still no answer. Nora came out of her room, rubbing her eyes, asking why I always yelled when Daddy never did. That question cut, but I shrugged it off and told her to go back to bed. Tara called me, giddy about the video. She said the views had doubled, that people thought Jason was a hero for standing up to Evan. She asked if she could monetize it. I told her she might as well. She laughed, saying Evan would be famous for being weak. I laughed with her, but when I hung up, the sound felt hollow. Online, the comments had shifted. Some still mocked Evan, but others said Jason was a bully. A few asked if I was cruel for laughing. I scrolled past those, deleting where I could. Jason texted me late, saying haters would always talk. He sent me a photo of his blazer draped on a chair, writing that I looked better in it. I smiled at the message, even though guilt twisted in my stomach. The next day, Evan's mother, Marianne, invited us to dinner. She served quietly, not making small talk. Halfway through, she looked at me and asked if I thought humiliating my husband made our daughter feel secure. I snapped that she was poisoning him against me. She didn't raise her voice, only said respect couldn't grow where ridicule lived. Cliff leaned back in his chair, saying Jason was reckless and I was blind. Lydia tried to smooth things over, saying everyone had faults. Tara said people loved the video, ignoring the glares. Evan said nothing. He just helped Nora finish her vegetables and then folded his napkin neatly. That silence again. Calm, steady, impossible to fight. Later that week, I found a business card in Evan's coat pocket. It was from a law office, clean lettering, the name Mark Jenner. My stomach flipped. When I asked him about it, he said nothing. He just looked at me and walked away. I shouted that he was pathetic, hiding behind lawyers. He closed the door to his study, leaving me fuming. I told myself he wouldn't dare. But the card sat heavy in my hand, proof that his silence had been building into something I hadn't seen coming. Nora's drawings grew darker. One showed 2 houses with her in the middle. She said she thought maybe she would live in 2 places soon. I laughed and said she was silly, but the way she looked at me told me she didn't believe my words. She clung tighter to Evan every night, refusing to let me tuck her in. I told myself she was spoiled, that he was turning her against me. But deep down, I knew it was my laughter at his humiliation that had cracked something she couldn't unsee. At the gym, Jason pulled me aside. He said we should be more careful, that HR had started asking questions about boundaries after hours. I laughed nervously and said it was nothing. He shrugged, saying top trainers never got touched. He said Evan was weak for hiding behind paperwork. I told myself he was right. But when I got home that night and saw Evan's folder growing thicker, I wasn't sure anymore. The silence in our house wasn't emptiness, it was preparation. Every page Evan printed, every receipt he taped, every note he wrote, it all felt like a wall closing in. I poured myself a glass of wine, scrolled Jason's texts, and told myself I was still in control. But the business card burned in my memory, and Nora's drawing of 2 houses sat on the fridge like a warning. And for the first time, I wondered if Evan's silence wasn't surrender at all, but the sound of tables slowly turning against me. The knock at the door came on a Tuesday morning, sharp and final. A courier handed me a thick envelope, my name typed neatly across the front. I thought it was bills again, but when I tore it open, stamped pages slid out across the counter. Legal words filled them: petition for separation, temporary custody, financial restraints. Evan was listed as primary custodian during school weeks. Exchanges at Marian's house. Joint accounts frozen for unusual spending. My hands shook as I flipped through page after page. Evidence index at the back. Tara's videos, Jason's posts, Nora's drawings copied and logged. I gasped and shouted that Evan was trying to steal my daughter. Evan sat calmly at the table with his coffee. He said all communication would now go through the co-parent app. He said he would collect Nora at 6. Then he folded the newspaper and walked out. I screamed at him that he was weak for hiding behind lawyers, but he didn't even look back. I grabbed my phone and called Jason. He told me to relax, that HR never punished top trainers, that Evan was bluffing. I said the papers were real. Jason told me to stay cool, that it would blow over. His voice didn't sound sure. I hung up and called Tara. She was pale when she answered. She asked if her videos were really in the evidence list. I told her yes. She cursed, saying she hadn't meant for it to go this far. She hung up before I could argue. Later that afternoon, Marion came to collect Nora. She carried her own folder, filled with neat logs, bedtimes, meals, homework notes. She said it was for stability. I rolled my eyes and accused her of interfering. She said calmly she was protecting her granddaughter. Nora hugged her tightly and left without fuss. Watching them walk away left me hollow. The next day, HR summoned me. Ria, the director, sat across the table with a stack of screenshots. She asked if I consented to a device audit. I forced a smile and said yes, but my throat was dry. She pointed to timestamps. Messages with Jason at 1 a.m, 2 a.m. I laughed nervously and said we were just passionate employees. She said boundaries mattered. I joked that passion was part of success. She didn't laugh. That evening, Evan placed another page on the counter. A sitter's note saying Nora had been returned at 11 on a school night. Across the top, in his careful handwriting, the word documented. I shouted that he was using our daughter against me. He said he was protecting her. His calm voice made me want to tear the notebook apart, but I couldn't move. I called my mother, Lydia, hoping for comfort. She said everyone shared blame, that maybe we had all gone too far. My father, Cliff, said Evan was vindictive, that real men didn't drag lawyers into marriage. I clung to his words, but they didn't warm me. When I tried calling Tara again, she didn't answer. That night, I sat alone in the condo with the legal papers spread across the counter. Every page looked heavier than the last. I poured wine and scrolled Jason's texts. His last message read, "Don't panic. HR can't touch me." It felt flimsy now, empty. I stared at the reflection in the glass door, me holding Jason's blazer, the same image the camera had caught. My chest ached. For the first time, I wondered if this was a fight I couldn't win. The next morning, Evan arrived at the door exactly at 6. He said he was there for Nora. I said she wasn't ready. He pointed to the co-parent app notification, which already listed the exchange time. I said he was cruel. He said it was order. Nora came running with her backpack, hugging him tightly. They walked away together, steady footsteps fading down the hall. I stood in the doorway, the stamped papers spread behind me, the silence of the condo pressing down. For the first time, I realized Evan wasn't bluffing. The courthouse was nothing like I imagined. No shouting, no drama, just beige walls, buzzing lights, and a long table where every page of my life was laid out in neat piles. Evan sat across from me with his lawyer, Mark Jenner, calm as ever. I tried to sit tall, but my stomach twisted when the mediator asked us to explain our positions. I said Evan was punishing me, that the roadside shove and party clips were just jokes, that Jason was harmless. I said he was trying to make me look cruel when I was only having fun. Evan spoke quietly, never raising his voice. He said Nora needed stability, that late pickups, public scenes, and online humiliation weren't stable. He slid forward Marion's caregiver logs, each page with bedtimes, homework notes, meals. He produced sitter statements about late-night returns. He handed over Tara's videos, Jason's posts, even Nora's drawings. Copied, dated, preserved. My throat closed as each piece hit the table. I tried to fight back. I said the camera lied, that people twisted things, that children imagined stories. The mediator looked at the papers, not at me. My lawyer shifted in his seat, whispering that the documents spoke louder than words. I felt cornered. When I said Jason was just protecting me, Evan's lawyer asked why HR had suspended him pending review. I had no answer. The mediator read the conclusions. Temporary custody to Evan during school weeks, exchanges at Marion's house, financial restraints on joint accounts, only routine expenses allowed. mandatory co-parenting class for both of us, and a boundaries course assigned to me. All communication restricted to the co-parent app. I gasped, saying Evan had stripped me of power. Evan stayed calm, repeating that it was for Nora's stability. The mediator moved to the next case. That was it. Back at the gym, HR closed its review. Ria called me in and said I was reassigned under a new manager, barred from after-hours events, required to complete ethics training. Jason had been demoted and put on final warning. He texted me later, saying it was temporary, that he would bounce back. I didn't reply. At home, Evan returned Jason's blazer in a sealed plastic bag with an HR inventory receipt. He left it on the chair without a word. I picked it up, but it felt heavier than fabric, heavier than evidence. It felt like the end. That evening, Marion arrived with Nora's backpack. Nora hugged me, then asked if Daddy was picking her up soon. I said yes. She nodded, waiting quietly until Evan knocked. She clung to his hand and walked out with him, calm and trusting. The co-parent app chimed on my phone with the finalized schedule: school nights with Evan, alternating weekends with me, holidays split. I stood in the doorway with my overnight bag beside me. In the reflection of the door camera, I saw myself holding Jason's blazer, the same image that had started everything. Evan walked away with Nora, their footsteps steady in the dusk. The app chimed again, confirming the plan. The condo fell silent, and that was the end. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.